So I'll begin with our first phase of conversation, and that will be with the scholar and economist, Professor Obafemi. From a structural economic perspective, what specific non-negotiable fiscal reforms must the government implement immediately to break the cycle of deficit finance consumption and redirect domestic borrowing towards genuine growth, enhancing investments?
Before I give my answer to that question, or my thoughts, not really answer because I'm not in an examination, my thoughts on the question, when I looked at the topic and what we're about to discuss, the question I asked myself, though I don't know the thoughts of others, is what really are we going to be saying that is different from what we have been saying in the past 40, 50 years about Nigeria borrowing, debt rates? And with that political will to implement some of these things, because Nigeria is not bereft of ideas. I think most of the time our problem is with implementation. Having said that, looking at that question, I want to say that when we talk about structural perspective, we have to know, remember that we are not talking about the market mechanism. Government has to come in. We are talking about reforms that will involve governments. And that was why I started from where I started, that would there be political will to do some of these things. Now, we have earlier said by the chairman, he has said that borrowing is not Nigeria's problem. And nobody will say we should not borrow. The question had always been, what are we borrowing for? What are we borrowing? How do we use this money borrowed? And when we talk about reforms, I think that Nigeria should be restructuring our expenditure. I put it a kind of expenditure switching and borrowing switches. I call it switches, though it's restructuring. What do I mean by that? We should stop borrowing for consumption. There should be an act of law dictating our borrowing. We shouldn't just borrow. We can't be borrowing money to pay salaries. We can't be borrowing money to run elections. We can't be borrowing things that does not promote production or enhance production. So the first thing is that we should be able to restructure our expenditure. What we borrow for, what are we really borrowing for? So we should borrow for things that will encourage production. So the government in borrowing to fill up the deficit should be able to borrow for things that will generate, that will help Nigeria, so that in the long term they'll be able to pay off without so much relying on the future suffering. Then the next thing, apart from this expenditure, because of the timing, is this what I call borrowing switching. Now, if we look at the country at the moment, most of the fiscal space, most of the funds are being taken up by the government. The government is aggressively looking for money to fund these deficits. And the banks, being who they are profit maximizing firms, would prefer that. So there should be a kind of borrowing switch. What I mean by this is that the banks themselves who are borrowing should be made to look at the private sector. You know, when I looked at this, I thought about this thing. Each time I'm going on the road, I saw sukuk. Is it not what they call it? Yes, sukuk. Sukuk is an example of what we should be making our banks to do. They should borrow, they should finance investments that will help production. Capital goods, yes, we know they are looking for profits. But this, idea of just lending to government because of the yields is not going to help Nigeria. It's not going to help Nigeria. So we must restructure the way banks, either by law, though they are for profit making, or however, so that the bank should also look at the private sector, not allowing the whole funds in the domestic space to be taken over by the large chunk to be taken over by the government. It will not help us. And again, I think that in this issue, we should learn to cut down on extra budgetary expenditures. Nigeria should cut down. We have made our budgets. Can we stick to these budgets? Can we stick to, smarter here, supplementary budget for this, supplementary budget for that? It's not going to help us. It's not going to help us. I think the government should find a way to stick to the budget we have made. If we can stick to our budget, it will help us. We will have growth. So some MDAs, you know, there had been an argument. They said that CBN will know policies what they're doing. They are just there doing NNPC. Nobody sees what they're doing. Everybody should be captured in the budget. In effect, is that Nigeria deficit financing that will enhance growth. We should look at our expenditure. We should not borrow and spend on importing food items, paying salaries, recurrent expenditure.
We see a persistent and considerable gap between the monetary policy rates and actual market yields. What does this imply? A fundamental breakdown in policy transmission due to fiscal dominance, or is it a rational market response to a lack of credible signals? What can correct this?
Thank you for that question, and I thank all the contributors. You see, we keep learning and unlearning. Though I'm here as a panelist, I also came to learn from the industry people. Now I'm in the classroom.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at what is going on in Nigeria, like I had earlier said, we are having a situation where government borrowing is almost crowding out private sector borrowing because of this aggressiveness on the part of the government to fund the fiscal deficits. The yields, government yields, the yields to government bonds keeps increasing. In fact, I kept looking at them. I discussed with my husband, I said, these yields are just going up, 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 up. And as it goes up, you don't expect banks or other investors who are rational, profit maximizers, to lend to the private sector for agriculture, for example, to lend to the private sector for anything that could be maybe for long term and all that. They will easily go to this government lower risk offers and put money there. So we see a situation where government yields, it keeps going up, and especially the banks and other investors, run there, crowding out the private sector. And the private sector, in trying not to be pushed away, struggling to survive their own yields, they will push it up. So what we are seeing is a situation where even the MPC will soon meet. They will soon meet. Even if they lower the interest rate, which everybody seems to be expecting that the interest MPR will be lowered, the private sector may not fare better because most of the domestic funds are taken over by the government because of their low yields. So what we see is not an issue of transmission. No. It's not an issue. It's not a failure in transmission. It's just the market behaving rationally because the market is rational. So that's where I'll put it. Thank you.
The federal government, of course, this 189 billion conversation is very important. They want to realize that from state-owned asset sales, and that's just a drop in the ocean, like Mr. Johnson Chukwu has stated, out of 25.27 trillion naira deficit. But from a structural economic perspective, does asset-backed revenue represent a genuinely sustainable third pillar alongside taxation and debt, or is this merely fiscal gap plugging that liquidates the balance sheet without creating recurring yield? What institutional architecture would distinguish value-creating asset financialization from a fire sale?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Abasi, and thank you, everybody. Again, I want to thank Mr. Chukwu for his elaborate discussion. And I want to take it from there. He has really given he spoke my mind on most of the issues. And now, to be able to answer that question, we can't just say whether it is this or that, because first and foremost, we don't know what they're selling. It is when we know what they are selling, we can now say, okay, it is financialization or the other one. We don't know what they're selling. They only told us that, 91 assets and the areas where they're taking it from. So until we know, they want to sell A or they want to sell B, we understand. And secondly, they've not told us the process. We don't know the process. How transparent will this process be? We don't know. And if we know the process and what they are selling, we can say, yes, they are on the right track, or no, they are not. on this, they are on that. Nigeria has gone through this before. We have gone through it before. And we all knew how it ended. The public, as we don't the government, there is a trust deficit between the government and the public. There's a serious trust deficit. And if the government want to do this, they want to do it in such a way that people will believe them, that is, they really want to, not just to liquidate the balance sheet, then they must bring out a process that is very transparent, very transparent. So until we know what they are selling, until we know how they intend to do it, it may be difficult to say it is either this or that. But for example, if, like he said, like Mr. Chukwu has listed a whole lot of things that he feels the government should not sell. Now, for example, if the government tells us, oh, we want to sell the refineries, assuming the refineries are out of the things listed. Was it the other day, the NNPC limited, the GMD said that they have been wasting a lot of money, all the money they spent, how many amount, repairing that refinery, those refineries is a waste. That it could have been used in health, education, and all those things. If government wants to sell the refinery, for example, now, those refineries, I will turn my hat up. It will be an issue of finalization, provided that they did it transparently. So it depends on what they want to sell. So until we see what they want to, and their process. So to be able to do it in such a way that it will not just be mere filling a gap, a funding gap, or liquidating the balance sheet, I believe that they must be very transparent. The other one, the last time they did it, it looked more like the elites or the political class shared the assets amongst themselves, and people didn't really know much or what went underneath. So when this one came up again, if we listen to people talking, it's like they want to share our commonwealth again. So for government to have this confidence, will I call it confidence, people's trust in what they are doing, they must do it using the best international practices that get independent and the international benchmark for asset valuation. How do we value these assets? They must be able to, like Mr. Chukwu said, they must be able to know that some of these assets, you don't need to sell them. You only need to get them working properly that will make money for us on the long run. It's just like a family. You have a house in a Broad Street and you have a house maybe in your village and you want to sell your house in the Broad Street where we know that rent is high. So the government should be able to differentiate which one is which by using best practices to do the evaluation. And then secondly, there must be transparency and the bids must be competitive. There must be transparency in what they are doing. People must know, not unlike before, that made people not to be very happy with what they did. And then secondly, there must be full disclosure of beneficial ownership. They must disclose who are the owners. Not the other one was a little opaque. People didn't really know. And then there must be public reporting of what is going on. You see, they must tell us this is our commonwealth. It's not anybody's own. If they want to sell anything, they should just realize that this thing is our commonwealth. It's not an individual's own. It's not a political party's own. It is owned by Nigerians, including me, including you. So we must know what the transactions, what they are doing. Let us know what they are doing. And then it must be insulated from politics. Let it not be used as a means of rewarding political loyalty. They must have the political will to do it transparently. So if they do all this, yes, we can say, and then be able to pick out the ones to sell and the ones we can still keep back for long term that can still generate revenue for Nigeria. It would have been a situation of finalization. Forgive me for my pronunciation, and not just fund gap filling. It's not just liquidating the balance sheet. So that's what I think. So we should know what they are doing and how they intend to do it before somebody can fully say, okay, this one is okay, this one is not okay. This gap between the MPR and yields.
Yes.
Part of the major issue is this issue of fiscal and monetary policy non-coordination. It has been a very big issue. The monetary policy is going this way. Fiscal policy is going that way. In fact, during the time of Okonjo-Iweala and Sanusi, it was so obvious. So why the MPC will soon come and bring out an MPR, and the thing will not be responded. The private sector cannot respond, or the system, because of this physical dominance. So we should manage our liquidity and try to have a kind of a coordination between the fiscal authorities and the monetary authorities. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
In 2 minutes, if you could mandate a policy parity that would fundamentally alter Nigeria's debt growth ratio based on where we are now, what would it be, and why would it be the most powerful lever for change? In 2 minutes.
Yeah, thanks so much. And as usual, as I said before, I thank all the contributors. I'm learning and I'm learning. By the time I go back to the classroom, my head will be filled with practical things for my postgraduate students. Thank you so much. We can't stop talking about increased productivity. So we should borrow. Let our borrowing be that, let our be project specific in such a way that we could even monitor the productivity of the projects. I had given an example of Sukuk. Sukuk is doing well. For those of us that go across Nigeria, you know our Sukuk is doing well. Can we repeat that kind of thing in our borrowing? And borrow for things we can monitor their productivity. And of course, like we have already said, let the Fiscal Responsibility Act, let that act be made effective. So I think that Nigeria we should work on our fiscal structure, because the monetary policy is overshadowed by the fiscal dominance as we are having now. So if we could do that and work on our fiscal structure, borrow for productivity's sake, borrow to encourage things that are growth-inducing or enhancing issues, I think we'll be better off for it. Let our borrowing be targeted. There are countries that do that, and let the law cover it. Thank you.